Hello and welcome to the Luv Doc podcast with hosts Waldo Wachewski and Ophelia Brewski.
Okay, so today we're going to dive into something I think a lot of us have probably run into at some point or another.
Oh, yeah?
Especially if you're,
in any kind of creative field?
if you have friends doing creative stuff,
Right.
giving feedback on creative work, which can be a whole minefield.
Yeah.
And we have a particularly interesting situation.
So you do.
That is sort of sparked by this letter to an advice column.
Right.
To a Luv Doc advice column.
Oh, Luv Doc. I love that.
Yeah. This person who calls themselves not really an editor.
Not really an editor.
Is basically struggling with how to respond
Oh, that's a
to
great name.
their best friend's girlfriend's aspiring fantasy writing.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the setup.
Yeah, that's complicated already.
So not really an editor works remotely for a publishing company,
Okay.
but not as an editor.
It's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Right away.
But of course, that connection has led the friend's girlfriend,
Oh, yeah.
who is this aspiring fantasy writer, to regularly submit her work for editing.
Naturally.
Right.
I mean, you see the publishing connection, you're like, okay.
Exactly.
You're the person.
You're my Inley.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker.
Okay.
The writing is not just like a little rough around the edges.
Right.
This person says it is abysmal.
Wow.
Like really, really bad.
Okay, so like we're talking.
I say like rudimentary grammar.
Oh, my God.
And punctuation errors.
So like really basic stuff.
Yeah, and just like meandering, incomplete thoughts.
So like not even getting to like the higher level issues of prose and things.
Not even, it's like sentence level stuff.
Oof. That's tough.
And so I think what's fascinating here is just right off the bat, you have this like collision of perceptions, right?
Absolutely.
So the girlfriend is seeing this connection to publishing and assuming a certain level of expertise.
Right. And I think that's a pretty natural assumption.
Total.
If you're outside of that world, you're like, oh, you work for a publishing company.
Yeah.
You must know about edit.
Right.
But of course, there are so many different roles within a publishing company.
And you don't necessarily know how to edit a fantasy novel.
Unless that's your job.
Just because you work at a publishing house. Yeah. And I think the other thing that is really interesting here is the feedback loop.
Okay.
Or lack thereof.
Right.
So this person, not really an editor, has tried for 6 months to give gentle, constructive criticism.
Oh, wow.
But instead of, taking it on board, the girlfriend just gets all sulky and pouty. And then it creates this ripple effect where the best friend is caught in the middle.
Oh, so now the best friend is getting involved.
Yeah.
And pressuring them.
And so then the best friend is pressuring not really an editor to just be more positive about the writing.
Oh, so they're in a real bind.
Yeah, so you're trying to manage someone's creative ambitions while simultaneously like protecting this friendship.
Right, and you don't want to, hurt the girlfriend's feelings.
Yeah, and also this person says that it's just like a prolific amount of bad writing.
Oh my God.
So it's not just like one short story and you're like,
one and done.
Okay, here's my notes,
Right, like a
it's like an ongoing saga.
Oh, that's rough.
So anyway, this is the situation that this person writes into the Luv Doc with.
Oh, okay. So what does the Luv Doc have to say?
And the Luv Doc, to their credit, is very empathetic.
Right.
Right away, they're like, oh, this is so awkward, like to be asked to critique something that is just objectively good.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to be in that position.
Yeah.
Especially when it's your friend's girlfriend.
Exactly.
Like that just adds this whole other layer.
It's so much harder than if it was just like some stranger.
Right, exactly.
And then the Luv Doc shares this great anecdote about how they once sent out something
For feedback,
and all they got back was silence. Like people would just be like,
awkward silence.
yeah, they said it's like reading tea leaves,
Oh, yeah, that is so true.
Trying to interpret the ellipses.
Like, what does that mean?
In an email.
Like, are they just busy or do they hate it?
Is this just like the most boring thing you've ever read?
Right.
And then the Luv Doc gets into this really interesting point about how if your creative drive is purely about ego,
right,
you're setting yourself up for a lot of potential humiliation and anguish.
Yeah, because you're basically just looking for validation.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it, then what?
Right.
And also, I think if you're that driven by ego, it makes it so much harder to take criticism.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're basically saying, like, if you criticize my work, You're criticizing me as a person.
Exactly.
Which makes it way harder to separate those things.
It's also personal.
Right. And so then the feedback feels like a personal attack.
Yes.
Rather than just feedback on the work itself.
Exactly. And the Luv Doc suggests that real creative drive comes from this like deep well of neurotic, gnawing necessity.
I love that.
So it's not about...
It's like you have to do it.
You have to.
Yeah.
Like it's not about getting praise. It's about getting this thing out of you.
It's almost like a compulsion.
Yes.
Like you just can't not do it.
And, you know, the Luv Doc, they do validate.
Okay.
Not really an editor's efforts here.
Yeah, right, because they've been trying.
They call their kindness and patience heroic.
Which, honestly, it does sound kind of heroic.
It does.
To deal with 6 months of that.
Of abysmal.
Of just constant.
At just being like,
I can't do this anymore.
I'm done.
Right.
And they also acknowledge that, you know, the girlfriend is clearly enjoying writing.
Right.
Which is a valid point. Like, creativity for its own sake has value.
Absolutely.
But the real issue here is misaligned expectations.
Holy crap. You're psychotically obsessed with the Luv Doc, but can't think of a flashy gauche way to share your obsession with the world? Stop thinking and make a beeline for the Luv Doc's home sweet home on the interwebs, thepleasurecraft.com, where you can find a veritable treasure trove of sick merch that will make even your coolest friends super gel. Honestly, I don't know why you didn't already think of this yourself, but you're welcome. Have fun on the Pleasure Craft. It was made just for you. Let me spell it out for you one more time. www.thepleasurecraft.com.
So the Luv Doc points out that essentially the girlfriend has enlisted not really an editor to help her become a better fantasy writer.
Right.
And the problem isn't that feedback was given. The problem is that it wasn't received with any sort of willingness to improve.
Yeah, like she wants the validation.
Yeah.
But she doesn't want to actually take the feedback and improve.
Yes. And the Luv Doc is very blunt here. They say, you don't have time for that. No one has time for that.
And that is so true.
It's like you can't be someone's unpaid therapist and editor.
Right. And especially when you have your own life and your own work.
Exactly.
And your own creative pursuits, potentially.
Right.
You can't just be constantly on call for someone else.
So what does the Luv Doc suggest?
Okay.
They basically say, you've earned your Purple Heart. It's time to step back.
Oof.
Just tell the girlfriend, like, hey, I hope you find your audience.
Right.
But I'm not.
Yeah, just be really direct and honest.
Yes.
But kind.
Yes.
Like, I think that's the key.
And this is a really important distinction, I think, that the Luv Doc makes here.
Okay, what's that?
Which is, for the girlfriend, writing is a joyful pursuit.
Right.
It's a hobby.
A passion.
A passion.
But not a profession.
But for... not really an editor.
Yeah.
Editing is work.
It's work.
It's like
paid work in this case.
Unpaid labor.
Yeah.
And so trying to merge those two perspectives is just...
Right, because the girlfriend's just like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
I love getting feedback.
Yeah, it's all very light and breezy for her.
Right, and not really an editor's sitting there like...
this is my job.
I'm spending hours on this.
Yeah, this is actually...
I have other things I could be doing.
Yeah, I have deadlines.
Yeah.
And so the Luv Doc says, you know, if the girlfriend and or the best friend can't understand this distinction, then you need to point them to some better resources. Like maybe she needs an actual editor.
A professional editor?
Or, you know, a writer's group.
Right, where she can get feedback from her peers.
Yeah, they actually specifically say, like fantasy writers in Austin.
Oh, okay.
Like maybe there's a group you can join.
Right.
And I think that's a good point because, you know, it's one thing to get feedback from someone who's just like a nice person.
Right.
Who's willing to read your stuff.
Your friend.
It's another thing to get feedback from people who are actually working in the genre.
Right. People who know what they're talking about.
Who know the market, who know.
Yeah, and who can give you constructive criticism.
Yes, and who can help you improve.
That's actually helpful.
Yes. And so this whole thing really underscores the importance of learning to take criticism.
Oh, yeah.
If you're serious about...
if you want to be a professional.
Being a professional, anything, but especially like a writer.
Right, because you're going to be getting rejected.
Constantly.
All the time.
You're going to be getting...
even if you're successful.
Yeah, even if you're super successful, you're still going to get...
you're going to get bad reviews. People are not going to like your work.
People are going to have notes.
You're going to get editorial feedback.
Yes.
And you have to be able to take that.
You can't just sulk.
Yeah.
So I think there are some really valuable takeaways here for anyone who's listening.
Okay, I like takeaways.
And who has ever found themselves in a similar situation?
Right, because I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, where it's like you want to be supportive,
but
you also don't want to be taken advantage of.
Right.
And so, first of all, it is absolutely okay to establish boundaries.
Boundaries are crucial.
Even with the partners of your friends.
Yes, even with family.
Yeah, you're not obligated.
You don't owe anyone your time and energy.
Yeah, to provide free labor.
Especially not creative labor.
Which
is so often devalued.
Yes.
And people are always like, oh, could you just do this quick thing for me?
Yeah, it'll be so easy for you.
They're so good at it.
And like, actually, no.
It's not easy.
It's a skill.
It takes time and effort.
Yes. And the other takeaway, I think, is that effective feedback is a two-way street.
Oh, yeah.
It requires not just someone who's willing to give the feedback,
right,
but someone who's willing to receive it.
And actually do something with it.
Yes.
Like not just hear it and then be like,
yeah, I'm going to ignore that.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, because it's hard to hear criticism.
It's so hard.
Even when it's constructive, even when it's well-intentioned.
And I think especially with creative work, it can feel so personal.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the other point that I think is really important is that enjoying something doesn't automatically mean you're good at it.
Oh, that is so important.
And this is true for
everything. Yeah.
You can love to sing in the shower.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you should be
an opera singer.
Stage.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a really important distinction there between doing something for fun and
doing it professionally. Yeah. And I think the girlfriend in this situation is kind of conflating those two.
Yes. She's like, well, I enjoy this.
So I must be good at it.
So that means I'm good at it.
And therefore I should be published.
Yes.
It's like, no, those are not the same thing.
And it's not to say that she couldn't potentially get there, but she needs to be
open to feedback.
Open to the feedback and the work.
Yeah. And she needs to understand that it's a process.
Yes.
It doesn't happen overnight.
And then I think ultimately what this all comes down to is that you need to protect your time and energy.
Yes. Self-care.
Self-care is so important.
And that includes saying no.
Yes.
To things that are draining you.
You're allowed to say no.
Even to friends.
Even to friends and their girlfriends.
Yes.
And so I think in this case, the Luv Doc is basically giving this person permission
to opt out.
Of a situation that is clearly causing them a lot of stress.
Right. And potentially harming the friendship.
Yes.
Which is the last thing you want.
Right.
So sometimes the most supportive thing you can do is just say, I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not the right person for this.
Or even I can't right now. It doesn't have to be this like absolute.
Right.
So I think, as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, we've really been looking at this very specific situation.
This very sticky situation.
It's a very sticky situation, but I think it has so many
broader implications
for all kinds of relationships and for all kinds of creative work.
Yeah, like how do we give and receive feedback in a way that is both honest and supportive?
Yes.
And how do we set boundaries?
And how do we protect our own time?
Without damaging relationships.
Yes.
That's the real challenge.
Delicate balance.
Yeah.
And so I think the final thought that I would leave you with is just to consider how often well-intentioned support can actually be harmful or at least unhelpful when you don't have those clear boundaries.
Right, because sometimes you think you're helping.
Yeah.
But you're actually enabling. Or preventing someone from actually growing.
Yes.
Because they're not getting the feedback they need.
Exactly.
Or they're not being pushed to actually improve.
And so I think it's really worth thinking about, what are the other areas in your life where this might be happening?
Where you might be enabling someone.
Where you might be enabling them.
Where you might be being enabled.
Yes, or where you're on the receiving end of that kind of unhelpful.
Well-intentioned, but ultimately unhelpful support.
And what would it look like
to
shift that dynamic?
To be more honest.
To be more honest, to be more direct.
To have those difficult conversations.
Have those.
Because sometimes that's the best thing you can do for someone.
Yes.
Is to be really honest with them.
Even if it's hard?
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Even if it's awkward?
Yeah.
It's still worth it.
In the long run.
In the long run.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about.
Lots to think about.
Lots to think about.
As always.
As always.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
This was a good one.
This was a fun one.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
To read the column that spawned this podcast, go go to austinchronicle.com/columns/the Luv Doc. There are probably worse things to do with your time, right?